What's up? Hey, hello everyone. Wow, super exciting here on this Friday. We are going to be talking about Survivor Season 35, Heroes versus Hustlers versus Healers. Out of order, I think. The merge episode, super crazy. We're halfway through, so my name is Rachel.
And I'm Alyssa, and we really apologize for not getting to last week's episode. Rachel wasn't able to fit it in her schedule, and she was like, "You want to find a guest star?" And I was like, "Sure, I'll find a guest star." And not a single one of my friends is still watching this season. So I was like, "Guess I'm not finding a guest star." So that is why we did not get to talk on last episode's stuff.
Yeah, when
You
Alyssa
mentioned it. So.
Yeah, when Alyssa was like, "Oh yeah, none of my friends are watching anymore," I asked some of mine, and then they were like, "Oh, like either I haven't seen the episode yet," and it was like Sunday, or they were like, "Oh yeah, I haven't seen like the past 3 or 4 episodes," and so maybe that says something about the season, but
I think you could also just say that we're busy college kids.
So last episode vote, Allie goes home. The penultimate episode before the merge that we saw this week. And I don't know, honestly, last week's episode, this week's episode, I was just sort of like really stressed out and angry while watching it, to be frank. And I think last week for me, semi-brief. Like the whole JP versus Allie thing. JP's so irrelevant in the season, and I think like to sum it for JP is just so irrelevant, and to vote Allie out, which makes sense, strategically somewhat, but then you have JP who literally isn't going to win the game, who literally doesn't get any confessionals. He's just there.
To me, it was just annoying because like they never really gave the reason why they decided like to vote Allie out over JP, because they were like, "Oh, JP is such a physical threat," but they never were like, "Okay, we don't need to vote out a physical threat right now." And I understand that part of that was because they couldn't like give away the fact that they were going to vote for Allie, but like I would have liked to see more rationale behind that.
Yeah, it seemed like the only reasoning for Allie going home was given in like the first 5 minutes of last week's episode when Ryan was like, "Yo, yeah, Allie's being such a insert expletive here," and I'm like, "SMH, Ryan, it's semi your fault she's like mad at you." Like, goddamn. And then he's like, "Yeah, maybe I should vote her out now because like she doesn't trust me anymore, and I can't have that going into the merge." And so like basically that seemed the reason why Ryan would want to vote Allie. They didn't really say much else besides that, like we were saying. And it seems like from a lot of Allie's like post-game stuff with interviews, like she's like, Chrissy is a master liar. Like Chrissy made her feel safe during those times. And definitely I feel like after last week's episode going into this week's episode, it is like the freaking Chrissy Ryan show up in here. Even in the preview or like the last week on Survivor thing, they were like, Ryan and Chrissy had to decide between JP and Allie going home last week. And then this week we see just like, I don't know, I see we only see Chrissy and Ryan on this entire episode, like the immunity challenge. I'm like, I don't fucking care about this math. I don't care Ryan got out first in like 2 seconds. Like, I'm just so annoyed.
What really annoyed me was the fact that Desi, who won the challenge, got less screen time than Ryan, who was out in the first 2 seconds. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. I think just like from last week's episode going into this week's episode, Chrissy is seemingly like very cocky about everything. Ryan too, to a certain extent, I feel like. So we see this episode a 12 people merge, so average amount I think nowadays in Survivor. I thought it was super interesting. Alyssa and I were talking right before we started the podcast how pre-merge 4 women out of the 9 who started this season were voted out, and only 2 men. And so with Jessica getting voted out this week, that's 5 women being voted out so far out of the 9. That starts with the 18 total people on the season. And then there are 4 women left now. And so the 4 are Lauren, Desi, Chrissy, and Ashley. And I don't know, like, honestly, I guess it sort of shows like how females are like targeted pre-merge, and then like the remaining ones will make it further in the game. But then honestly, like the females that we have left, besides maybe Chrissy and then like maybe Ashley, like Lauren and Desi, I don't really see much of them on the show.
Yeah, I feel like Desi, there is like no way for Desi to win just because she's like, she has like 0 confessionals despite the fact that she's like supposedly like doing stuff in the game, like winning immunity and stuff. And I feel like Lauren, like she's been getting a solid edit, but I don't think she's been getting a winner's edit. And I'd say the same for Ashley. So
No, yeah, like 100%. I think so. I think Jessica, Allie, and then Rourke were probably the top 3 females that pre-game people were like, okay, those are the 3 females I could see winning the game. And I feel like a lot of people preseason had Rourke as their winner pick, and then definitely at the beginning of the season, people really liked Allie. So I think, and like we've been seeing a lot of good things from Jessica too. Alyssa and I were talking, like even in last week's podcast, we were like, you know, we really like Jessica, blah, blah, blah. And then whoop-de-doo, we see this episode and literally what we predicted happened. And I mean, yeah, there's not that many women left. The merge, they had the feast, Outback sponsored, hella sponsorship there. So I mean, honestly, if I were on the show, I would basically just be like, oh my God, like Outback, blah, 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 just to get screen time.
yeah, I feel like it was so obvious that it was sponsored just because they were just like, they're starving, obviously, but at the same time, when you're starving, you don't care whether or not meat falls off the bone. You're just like, give me some food, you know?
Exactly. Like, I would do it for the confessionals. I'll be the Ryan. LOL, no. But, like, honestly, I feel like that's what certain people on the season are doing. Like, Ryan basically just says what the camera wants to hear and sort of going to the Cole thing, I think like Cole is basically sort of really fake this season. Like all of his confessionals sound so scripted. I feel like it doesn't sound natural. And I'm like
he's always comparing Survivor to a mountain. And I'm like, okay, you do that. That's totally something normal people do.
Yeah. And I feel like Cole doesn't really seem like the type that's like super aware of his surroundings. So when he starts apologizing to Ben about like the whole eating too much food thing, I'm like, that seems sort of fake. Like, did someone tell you to go apologize to Ben that like wasn't
Jessica
just
and Lauren told him. So
yeah. I'm like, producers are like putting too much input in here. Because I don't know. I feel like Cole seems like he'd never really listened to Jessica or Lauren before this episode. So
I mean, he did start to realize that like he was not as safe as he seemed to think he was. So I wonder if like the realization kind of like made him do what he did. And like to me, that's just kind of like too little too late type thing. And like I would not be surprised if Cole was the next one to go.
No, yeah, for like the next time talking, I'm like, basically we can probably predict the next 2 or 3 votes. So guess we can skip 2 weeks of podcasting. But immunity challenge, I feel like for me, the immunity challenge, I was really thinking about like first immunity challenge, new season, you don't know any of these people. Strategy, should you try super hard in the first immunity challenge or should you get out super early like Ryan so people don't think you are an immunity challenge threat? Because I feel like for someone like Ashley to go like 40 minutes in and then to lose, it doesn't really benefit you anything because you lost. But now everyone thinks like, oh, you can stand on the balance beam and like wiggle the ball for 40 minutes.
I think part of that has to do like whether or not people are already going to perceive you as a challenge threat. Like in the tribal immunity challenges, like Desi was slaying. So it's like if people are going to think that you're a challenge threat already, like someone like Cole, who like obviously like looks like very beefy and stuff, like it benefits him to do well in immunity challenges because it's like he's not hiding anything from anyone. Like they already know. that he's like strong and stuff. I feel like it's more the people who don't look like they'd do well in immunity challenges. Like if Chrissy won this challenge, that would be really bad for her because people would be like, oh, she's strategic and she can win a challenge. I gotta get her out. And so I think it's definitely, it depends on who you are, you know?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. That's like really interesting because I feel like, I don't know, personally, I feel like, okay, getting out middle of the pack, unless like, you know, you're being targeted, then I feel like you should try a little harder. But if like they said at tribal council, if your name, you know, anything can happen. But if you feel like your name isn't one of the X amount that's like been brought up, then like the kind of thing, you shouldn't put yourself out there if like you think you're like pretty safe at tribal council or whatever, because like, yeah, smart and strategic and like can be physical, like no go. And I think like when they do puzzle challenges, people will realize like how smart Chrissy is, and I feel like they've already started to realize, at least when like Lauren was like, oh yeah, she spit out those numbers just like that, you know.
Those numbers like weren't that difficult. Like I did it in my head before Chrissy did, but I guess it's kind of more impressive because she's low on sleep or whatever. But that's
Jesus, I was like, big numbers. I'll listen.
Yeah, when she was like 1,100 and change, I was like, it's actually, and then I was like the real number, but I forget what that was. Whatever 30 times 38 is. 1,140, that's what it is.
Yeah. So, I mean, immunity challenge, I think, I don't know, like this episode didn't really have that much, I think, besides like talking about, oh, who might vote for who. And I think if we did the podcast last week, we probably would have like started to see these like divisions, because I feel like they were sort of predictable, like tribal divisions. I think just like Ben staying with the heroes and hustlers was pretty predictable. I feel like Ben has a good bond with Chrissy. Like he wouldn't go back on that. But I feel like what was interesting was Lauren going with the healers. And I think because Allie got voted out last time, I really feel like Lauren is sort of like the person you can sort of go to the end. Like Lauren seems like she's thinking like out on the island, but I feel like Lauren really needs like someone else to tell her what to do. And we saw that with Lauren and Allie. And now I think we're seeing Lauren like hook onto Mike. So I think she needs someone to cling to.
I think that she's doing enough in the game that like it's not just her being a goat though, because like she isn't like clinging to Mike. I think she sees it as like building the relationship with him, but she's also building a relationship with other people. Like I see a goat as someone who like only has a relationship with the person they're trusting to bring them to the end. And I feel like the fact that Lauren's building relationships other than the one with Mike is like at least somewhat promising in terms of her not being a total goat.
Yeah. So I would say JP is a goat. I would say Lauren, you know, like she's like thinking out there. We've seen her have a few confessionals, but I feel like if she, Mike, and Ben go to the end, I feel like Lauren isn't winning the game. I feel like Mike or Ben would have a better chance, and I feel like the Mike, Lauren, Ben thing, I think that's a really good like secret thing that they have going on.
Yeah, I feel like of all of the guys left, Ben would be my favorite to go to the end. And I guess I could stand Mike as a winner, I guess. He's definitely getting the David edit though.
Yeah, and I feel like Mike, Lauren, and Ben all have like the thing like, oh, we're playing it for our families. You know, we all have these backstories. Like we're all like older people on this season. So I feel like if go to the end, which is totally plausible, I feel like maybe. I think after this vote, yeah, no, I think those three can make it past the next two votes, and then things will start switching up, and then I think they can like link back up, and like when things start to change, then I feel like people will realize like Chrissy's playing the game really hard, like we need to get her out kind of thing.
Yeah, I feel like it's definitely a matter of when people start to realize who's in dominant positions in the game. just because sometimes like people seem to realize that sort of thing too late, and that's when they get into trouble. It's when they don't realize who's pulling the strings until after their strings are already being cut.
When we thought David wouldn't get voted out of Millennials versus Gen X. Good times. And then, shit, yeah, that was during like finals week last year. So I remember Corey and I were watching it like in like the study room, and like we were fucking screaming, and it's like a quiet area. Good times.
It was crazy, but
Tribal.
I definitely think that Chrissy is not going to win because she is a threat and people see her as a threat. So
Yeah, I think a threat too early. Definitely you don't want to be the person that's getting votes straight out of the merge, because then I feel like people will continuously gun for you until they get you out, because you still have so many votes left. You want to be someone that like gets recognized as a threat, maybe like final 7, so then you can make like final 5 and then get further in the game. But Tribal Council, we see Joe pulling out the idol, which basically I think seals the deal for Jessica going home. And Alyssa and I have talked about this like 3 or 4 times probably on this podcast this season, but like every single time in Survivor, when you want to like hurt or debilitate the male that you want to like vote out, but you think, oh, you know, the male has like an advantage or the immunity idol, as we saw this episode with like the Chrissy Ryan group wanting to vote Joe or Cole, but thinking they have an advantage or an idol. So, let's vote Jessica because, you know, she's the right-hand girl. We want to split them up. And she's female and probably doesn't have an advantage.
I really don't understand the logic behind them being like, oh, Jessica doesn't have an advantage. Like, if anything, I'd expect her to have an advantage more than, like, Cole, just because it's like, who would you watch for finding an advantage? Like, I'd be watching out for Cole, but not Jessica.
Yeah, so that's why they would vote Jessica, right? Because they wouldn't think she has something.
No, I'm saying that if I was on the island and I was thinking, oh, people are going to go out searching for immunity idols, I'd watch Cole to make sure he didn't have an immunity idol or get an immunity idol, which would mean that I wouldn't know whether or not Jessica had one because she could have gone while I was watching Cole.
Oh, yeah, because you're not, like, paying attention. And I think that also just goes to show, like, I mean, technically, I guess I feel like this would be considered an easy vote because, oh, like, you know, we have majority, or we thought we had majority, and oh, let's vote Jessica. She probably doesn't have any advantages. And I guess the reasoning also is like Joe and Cole found that first hidden immunity idol, so maybe, oh, Joe might, if he has one, give it to Cole because they found it together. But we don't think anyone will give Jessica anything. But I feel like Cole maybe would have given Jessica something if he had something to save her. And, like, nobody thought it'd be Jessica because they never thought, like, her name would be brought up, which makes it, like, a good blind side. But I feel like in the long run, like, vote mattered all that much besides, like, a good female going home. But I feel like in the grand scheme of things, like, this vote just allows the Chrissy Ryan group to have majority for probably 1 or 2 more votes until something switches it up. And I think people realize that, like, Ryan and Chrissy can't be the queen bees anymore.
Yeah, I feel like Ryan and Chrissy are definitely going to be like those people who end up getting betrayed by their own alliance just because everyone knows that they're the ones calling the shots, I feel like. And it's like, when you're the ones calling the shots, the people below you do not want to see you stay because they want to be the ones calling the shots. So
yeah, so I feel like this episode just like set up, I think the next 2 episodes, we can probably predict. I feel like, you know, they will continue to try to get Cole or Joe out. And I mean, honestly, this vote worked perfectly for like the Chrissy and Ryan basically only, the tightest 2, I feel like, because you know, they flush a hidden immunity idol and they vote. Like, good tribal for the Ryan Christie show. They have majority and flush an idol. And I think Cole and Joe will continue to be on the chopping block. next time, unless they win immunity and the other side has majority, so why not vote them? And they don't have an advantage. And I really don't think they would vote like Desi, Mike, or Lauren, who are also on that like minority alliance now, because there's honestly no need to.
Yeah, I feel like of the two, they'll probably try to end up voting Joe first, just because Joe is the one that they see as more strategic. And one of the things is, like, Cole's fainted, and someone made a joke about that. So now everyone knows that Cole has fainted because of lack of food and stuff. So I feel like they're less likely to perceive him as an immunity threat because they know that, like, he's getting weak from lack of food.
Yeah, and I, like, honestly, also, I feel like they don't see Cole as, like, a strategic threat, whereas Joe, like Chrissy was saying, Joe is, first of all, like, annoying, but he's also super smart. So we, like, vote him out because he's annoying and he's, like, strategic, has found 2 idols, stuff like that. And I think the next 2 votes would probably be like 1, 2, either of them, unless something like maybe Mike will play a hidden immunity idol for like himself or Lauren, and then they could get someone in the majority out. But I really feel like Mike isn't going to be on the chopping block as well, because I feel like Mike would save Mike and Lauren. I feel like if Chrissy or Ryan was like, let's vote them, he'll be like, why not vote someone else?
Yeah, I feel like Mike is like a good enough social player. And the genius behind Mike's social game is that no one sees him as like a social player. They just see him as a nice guy. So I feel like Mike, I'm not sure whether or not he would play the idol on Lauren, just because when he and Jessica found it, he was like, this idol is for Mike, not for like my alliance. And I feel like that's also one of the things that Joe is having a problem with in this game. Like, he keeps playing idols on himself and not on. And the first time it was good because he was actually the one on the chopping block. But he's not going to constantly be on the chopping block. So
yeah, I guess that's interesting. We've seen a lot of like fake idol plays, sort of like when people pull out the idol at tribal council. And I guess it'd be interesting to talk about or like look back at past seasons where they have like bluffed the idol, basically bringing it out and then like either playing it or not playing it, and then seeing how the votes turn out. Because even in Philippines, no,
I think Philippines, yeah.
Fans versus favorites.
Whatever.
When Malcolm pulled out the 2 idols for like the 3 Musketeers, and then they ended up playing it, but other people changed their vote. They had the backup vote or whatever to vote Philip out. So I think it'd be interesting to like, I guess, look back and see if anyone wants to do some research for us to like see like the statistics on that. And then, because I guess it's interesting, it's like do you think they switch the vote, or am I still on the chopping block even though I'm immune? Like, safe than sorry, or like waste my idol?
I think it's really interesting too, just because like they had no way of communicating to each other, like, oh, we're switching the vote now. Because like if you're very obvious about like switching the vote, you get a situation like you had in Game Changers, where like suddenly there's pandemonium and everyone's whispering and stuff. And so it's like, you need to have your backup plans in place, but then you also need to have a way to communicate when you're going to the backup plan, or just hope that everyone in your alliance like knows the conditions for when you go to the backup plan. Because like if half of your alliance switches to the backup plan and the other half doesn't, you're screwed.
Yeah, which I feel like it's like kudos to like Chrissy, maybe Ryan, but I think like we saw a lot of like Chrissy talking on the beach when everyone was circled up. She was like running the scenarios for everything, and I feel like that definitely, like, she was probably the one that said like, oh, if Joe or Cole pull out an advantage, everyone vote Jessica, like before going to travel, so then everyone knows like these are the conditions. If this or this happens, we vote Jessica. If like no one pulls an idol or whatever, like maybe split the vote between one of them too. But that's like really interesting, I think.
But I think Chrissy running the show is also what's eventually going to get her in trouble.
No,
because
yeah,
like you said, very obvious about being the one in charge, I feel like. So
yeah, and I feel like for this episode, to round it out, I feel like, to be honest, Ben picked the wrong side. I think, Chrissy is super smart. She's borderline cocky at the moment. But on the healers side, if he went with healers and brought them to the 7 majority this episode, I think, Ben is super close with Lauren and Mike. He might have beef with, like, Cole and them. But, like, Cole, I don't see Cole, like, flipping on you, that kind of thing. They seem very loyal. Jessica, Cole, Mike, Lauren. Jessica and Cole were, like, gung-ho for the 5 to the end. And then bringing in Desi and Joe, like, those are bigger threats that would have been voted out before you. And I feel like even on the hustler hero side, there are bigger threats than Ben. But I feel like there's more dumb people on the healer side. Jessica and Cole, super loyal. And I think staying with Chrissy is more tight with other people than I feel like Ben is to her. Because I feel like Chrissy, if she makes, like, final 3, she would want to bring JP and, like, someone else, probably not Ben, probably not Ryan. Like, Chrissy has good relationships. I feel like Chrissy's smart enough to want to bring, like, dumb people to the end, so she wins. And I don't see Ben in that final 3, but I do see Ben in a final 3 with Lauren and Mike.
Yeah. I feel like the main thing would be for Ben is he needs to exploit the fact that, like, there are bigger threats than him. Like, in his side of things, he can get out Chrissy and Ryan first, and while he's, like, gunning for Chrissy and Ryan, he can be building his relationships with other people and then make it so he's the one kind of where Chrissy is now, where he's running the show, and then he also has those strong relationships that he needs to, like, bring stupid people to the finals with him.
Yeah, because I definitely feel like the heroes hustler side is a lot more tight than the healers side, which makes it really difficult. Ben, I feel like, who is only super close with Chrissy, to, like, find his fit, find his way in there. Because when you're only close to, like, the head honcho, like, that doesn't get you that far. But I feel like Ryan's close with Chrissy. He's close with Devin. Like, Ashley's close with Devin. Ashley's sort of close with JP, maybe. Like, everyone else is, like, intermixed in that tribe. Whereas on, like, healers, I feel like Joe is the only one that's, like, maybe thinking. Everyone else doesn't get enough screen time.
Yeah.
Joe and Mike.
I feel like Ben could maybe, like, swing vote himself, like, make himself into the swing and tell the healers, like, listen, I made a mistake by helping vote out Jessica, but I want to work with you guys now, and then use that to get rid of the people on the other side that he doesn't like. One of the things is there's a lot of benefit to both sides from getting rid of, like, their stronger people, because it's like if you're one of the people like Devin or Ashley, like, you need for people to, like, the threat people to get out of the way, otherwise you have no hope of winning the game.
Yeah, like 100%. I think we'll sort of see this season play out with, maybe Cole Joe going home next 2 episodes, and then I think the tides will change, and then people, like, the lesser people, like the Devins and the Ashleys and the Bens and, like, those kind of people, Ben, Lauren, Mike, will, like, link up with them, and then they'll try to vote the people like Chrissy, like Ryan out. And then, then we'll have a good-ish season, I guess. But then, then it's always like, oh, you're left with, like, the second-tier people because the top-tier people get voted out. But
You're game changers.
yeah, so, like, I mean, I don't know. I can see that playing out. I feel like right now, winner picks, I feel like Ben would probably be the person with the most chance. I feel like he's under the radar enough to keep, like, slipping by in votes. Like, he's likable enough. And, like, I think he would be deserving, if he does some stuff in the next, like, before Final Tribal, deserving of the title. I just feel like Chrissy and Ryan could win this show also, but I feel like they're too forward right now to make it 12 more, like, half the amount more days that are left.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things is for Chrissy and Ryan, like, they've been getting such strong edits out of the gate that, like, it would be almost too obvious that they'd be the winners, because everyone, like, even the people who aren't, like, readers of Edgic or who aren't super fans of Survivor would be like, oh yeah, Chrissy and Ryan like have good chances of winning based on how often they're on the screen. I think one of the like bad things about this season is like it seems like people either have a really, really strong edit or they're just invisible. Like there are no people who are in between. Because like invisible people are like JP and Desi and yeah.
And then you have your middle people sort of like Ashley, Ryan, or Ashley, Devin, Ben. You can put Lauren in there. Mike maybe like in between top and middle.
The thing is, like, most of those people, it's like they get good edits based on which episode they're in. Like, it's not like they're consistently middle. It's like they have a really good episode, and then they're not there at all. And then they have a really good episode, and then they're not there at all.
Yeah, I definitely feel like Ashley gets a good amount of confessionals, but that's, I guess, like, pretty much it. I'm trying to think. I don't know. Like, I really, like, maybe Ashley will win. She's been getting decent stuff, and I feel like she could be under the radar enough, but
I feel like Desi would need to, or Ashley would need to, like, pick up a little, just because we've seen some of her, but it hasn't been a ton as far as, like, actually her, because her main thing in the beginning was, like, whether or not she was a power couple, and it's like, that's not a super great way to set up your season.
I feel like, honestly, I'm going to be sort of bummed out if we predicted the winner right now at the merge episode, because I feel like in the past, at least like once you start seeing like a character start to pick up at the merge, you're like, oh, you know, they could be a potential winner. And I feel like we've seen it in past seasons. I remember like for Michelle's season when she won, like 2 episodes into the merge, I was like, oh, Michelle's getting a lot more screen time. Like maybe she wins this up. Like maybe she wins this season because like she's getting a lot. And I feel like what makes a season good is like when the winner is someone who deserves the win and it is unpredictable. Like I don't think we saw Adam winning, like Millennials versus Gen X, but I feel like we could predict last season's vote with Game Changers.
I feel like one of the things is you don't want it to be like totally out of left field. Like you want to be able to like look back and be like, oh yeah, it makes sense that this person won. Like even if we weren't entirely sure that Adam would win, like looking back, it's like, oh, he has a really strong edit, and like we learn about him as both a person and as a game player.
Yeah, and it's like Final Tribal Council is interesting because like Hannah did a really good job. And it was like, shit, you know, who's gonna win now? So I think like things like that, and I think like that just goes to show, I guess. I think like Brad Culpepper didn't do a good job in Tribal Council last season. So I feel like that like you could sort of tell like, oh, you know, it's not going to him to win the season.
Yeah. I think it's just winners aren't becoming like I know it's a really big issue on the Survivor community about whether or not there's like actually such a thing as an undeserving winner. Because like you have people who are like, oh yeah, Russell was totally robbed, Aubrey was totally robbed, but then you have people being like, if they didn't win, then it's because they didn't manage the jury properly. So I feel like winners are becoming an increasingly contentious part of the Survivor community.
Which I guess is what makes this show so interesting. Like, no matter like how good or how well of a game you've played, like anything could happen Final Tribal Council.
Yeah, and I feel like it'll be interesting to see whether or not they continue to go with the kind of like more Socratic seminar style tribal council, because I feel like that style of tribal definitely would advantage different people, just because I feel like Ryan is really good at witty one-liners, so he'd be really good at like the question and answer format, but if he had to like manage all of these people at once, he'd probably not do as well, just because you can't witty one-liner your way through like a conversation.
Yeah. Definitely, like, hopefully all of our predictions this episode don't actually come true and we didn't just like outline the rest of the season because then it'll be pretty boring. But yeah, I asked my dad to make the Towers of Hanoi immunity challenge puzzle, so hopefully we can get that coming out to you soon, and then we can film it and be like really, really cute, I think, like to teach you all how to do that puzzle because it's got a lot of strategy to it. I'm excited.
Yeah, and my sister is actually in an algorithms class, and so she said that they're working on the insanity puzzle in their algorithms class. So I told her that she needs to figure out how to do it so we can actually learn how to do the insanity puzzle.
And then we can remake that cube video because that was an epic fail. Yeah, I don't know. I really want to do more of those like side videos. I think like our excuse me, our one about the slide puzzle one has like over 2,000 views, and I think it's just like something like cool to know, something really interesting, and something that definitely is good for Survivor if you ever play, or just in general a nice party trick.
Yeah. But anyways, we'll hopefully have those videos up for you soon. We're going to obviously be podcasting next week's episode. So, yeah, we'll see you guys then. Bye.
Bye.